Hey, my name is Nate Norby, and I chose to talk about Book Love by Penny Kittle. I was first introduced to Penny Kittle by a colleague when we were discussing another of her books called Right Beside Them. It kind of led to that, and we have similar philosophies on reading and independent reading in the classroom. So I started reading Book Love, and I didn't finish it, and now I just did. So glad I did. One of the things that Book Love addresses is what if my students don't love to read? It's all about developing depth, stamina, and passion in adolescent readers. And Kittle focuses on talking about like the challenges that teachers face with whole class novels and how it's just not an effective way and how students need independent novels to connect to. Her philosophy is that teachers provide students with worthwhile, engaging, and relevant books students will read. She focuses on the teacher's role as a guide, and she talks about how important it is to get to know a student to provide interesting level texts that will challenge the student and be engaging and relevant to them. The problem for the way we do it now with whole class novels and a lot of people is that students don't read the texts provided in class often. They fake their way through them. And many kids end up getting through high school this way. This means that when they get to college, they're going to have a lot of problems with that. And it's a terrible format for their education. Another problem is that even by the time they get to high school, students give up because they have not built up the stamina and the fluency to be successful. They haven't been practicing the skills they need to be good readers. And when they get to high school and they have challenging texts, they give up because they haven't had the practice. And Kittle says this practice is important for them to work toward. Another problem is that students can't relate to the books we have in class. If we have a whole class novel as teachers and we're reading Where the Red Fern Grows, not every student can connect to it. They just don't see themselves as that character and they can't make those connections. So it's important that we find literature that goes through the struggles like the characters that they do. Another thing we need to do is make sure that students set goals and have something to work toward. It can't just be, hey, here's some books now, you go out and do it. It has to be more like, here are your goals. What will challenge you as an independent reader when we talk to students? And that will help level them and help them have something to strive for. And there's a lot of different ways you can do it, not one perfect way. She also says that it's important to have a relationship with your students. Duh, we know that. But for this, it even more so talks about how it's not just about a system. And if that's what a teacher's looking for, that's a mistake. It's about getting to know students and then finding things that are relevant to their lives, and that will help them be readers. She also says there's often misconceptions with reluctant readers. People think that they are these kids who they don't know how to read, so they're not going to read. But it's not that simple. A lot of times there are students who they don't want to read because they don't buy in. And it's important to reach those students and help them see themselves in books so they will read. One way that teachers can do that is by having an awesome classroom library. And she talks about the importance of having a classroom library and then having student agency. She lets her students organize her books. She lets them choose books in the future and recommend them. And that gives students a lot of buy-in, which is really important because this is something they should be a part of. Another thing that students lead is that they go through conferences with her. And she says she focuses on the conferencing where the student leads it and how she talks them through, but oftentimes she just lets them direct it as they go. And this is important because as a teacher, you need to learn to listen to what the student is saying. If students don't do this, the problem is when they get to college, they haven't built up that background and they are going to be overwhelmed and they will not be ready to be lifelong learners. They are going to be overwhelmed. Students, she said, that she did research on were expected to understand everything they read and apply that in many long papers, and they just couldn't. A practical skill that she said to work on for the meantime to help them get to that level is use books they read, find books from your classroom, and say, hey, look at the craft in this book. How did this author do it? And we can get them to focus on relevant text that they can see like, oh, this isn't just something I do for school. It's something writers do, which leads us to good writers steal. She said that writers should be stealing from others. They should take the good parts of other people's writing and look at it and be like, hey, this can help my writing, and they can adopt that. And that's what we should train our students to do. That's part of the independent reading philosophy. Don't just sit there. Let them work with it. Another thing she talks about that I thought is very relevant to students is students all read at different speeds. Because of this, we as teachers need to know that they shouldn't all have the same length. They shouldn't all have 35 pages or 40 pages or whatever arbitrary number. They should have it timed, and then they should set reading goals and figure out what their rate is. In order to be successful with this philosophy, it's important that there's a community buy-in. She talked about how important it was that her whole school did this. I think one takeaway is that it's important that everyone in a school is doing this. Every student needs to see every teacher read. Every student needs to feel like this is a valuable part and see how it affects professionals. How will I use this in my classroom? I already do. I read for 10 minutes with my students at the beginning of class. Sometimes I conference with them during that time. I do other things like I had our principal give book talks, and I've given book talks. I need to focus more on having student-led book talks at the beginning of my class in the future because I think that will make it more relevant. I also need to engage reluctant readers better. I get frustrated sometimes with them. I believe all teachers do it. But what I'm doing next year is I have homeroom time with students, and I'm going to get some of the lowest students who have some behavioral issues and find relevant reading for them. Say, hey, this is why this matters. This is what can help you. Another way I can actually incorporate this better into just overall, not just for reluctant readers, is mentor texts. I kind of emphasize that a lot. I love what she said about mentor texts and using the books they're reading as craft. I need to do better with that. I need to find a way to incorporate mentor text into just kind of our everyday activities that we do. I can improve my conferencing in a couple of ways. I need to do better about using guiding questions and resisting the urge to interrupt. When I ask a student, I need to not tell them. I need to let them tell me. And I think sometimes as a teacher, I have trouble releasing the control to students, but that's something that I think is important. Thanks for watching.